Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine O'Neill Dunham from Philanthropy, New York, and we're here today for a security awareness training and seminar with Bart McDonough, the founder and CEO of Agio Technology. Agio recently conducted a vulnerability assessment of Philanthropy New York's computer system, and Bart was kind enough to be with us here today to provide some security awareness training for frontline staff. We hope that you'll be able to use this repeatedly with your frontline staff to ward off any threats to your system, and that you enjoy the presentation. And now I'll turn it over to Bart.
Thank you, Catherine. Just test this. So let's look up on the screen here, and you see an image that you're going to feel this free falling a lot today, because we're going to start off with some of the risks, but you're going to feel like you don't even have a parachute at times. This is tough stuff. Cybersecurity today, you know, if you look in the newspaper, almost every day there's a new attack, and we're going to talk about some of those. But you're talking about some of the largest companies in the world, right? Target, Sony, Anthem Healthcare. If they can't secure their environment, how do you expect to do it on your personal systems as well as smaller organizations? And we're going to talk to you about some basics. We call it brilliance in the basics. Before I do that, let me just give a little background on Agio and myself. We're a 140-person company located here in Manhattan with an operational headquarters in Norman, Oklahoma, as well as a satellite office in Raleigh, North Carolina. We primarily focus on the alternative asset industry and providing IT and cybersecurity for them. What does that mean? That's hedge funds, private equity firms, small as 5 people all the way up to 2,000-person firms. And we work with them on developing cyber policy, doing risk assessments, technical penetration tests, vulnerability assessments, as Catherine mentioned we did for you guys, as well as end-user training. We're doing about 10 of these seminars a month globally, as well as then doing what's like real-time managed security. So we live and breathe this. This is tough stuff. It requires a high degree of expertise to pull it off well, but as Catherine said, you are the front line as an end-user community. When we're going to go through a slide here, but when we think about all of the attacks and we think about hacking and breaches, you often think of the Tony Stark, you know, doing his war games thing, throwing screens around, code flashing around. It's much easier than that. We'll talk about that. So you do have a parachute, and we'll get to the parachute by the end of this, and you'll feel better, I promise. But it's going to be rough going for a little bit. Okay, so this is a graphic we made that kind of highlights some of the headlines even in the last 12 months. And 2 things to think about here. You see some of these very technical ones, and we have great terms in cyber: shell shock, right? Heartbleed. I need the movie over what's that? The famous guy that does all the movie previews, and he has that great deep voice. Shell shock, right? Heartbleed, crypto locker, great stuff. And some of those are very technical, and they're about vulnerabilities. They're about system vulnerabilities, and a vulnerability is effectively, think about it as a known hole in a defense system. So you think about your front door, and you have 10 deadbolts, and a vulnerability says, oh, I know how to open lock number 4, and lock number 4 not only unlocks 4, it unlocks the rest of them. You can walk right in. But some of them are much easier than that. I'll point your attention to the one on the top left that says iCloud hack leaks hundreds of private celebrity photos. Who do you think was responsible for that? That's Apple's service, right? For those that aren't aware. It says hack, and this was an actual headline. So it says iCloud was hacked. You think of the Tony Stark, right? Code flying around, breaking into a firewall. Not at all. The way that was done was through what they call social engineering. It's the term. So Jennifer Lawrence was the famous one. This is where they had her photos and nude photos, so it got a lot of press attention. But what happened is, you know, when you sign in, you have a username and password. Those are your digital assets that allow you to go in. It's the same as your keys. And then when you forget it, it asks you some questions. Where you grew up, first grade teacher's name, mother's maiden name, first dog, all that stuff. Well, there was about 15 celebrities that got socially engineered because all the answers to those questions were on Wikipedia. And so whose fault is it? Is that Apple's fault? Was Apple unsecure? Well, Apple's very defensive about this, right? So if you ever hear Tim Cook speak, he will say, Apple was not breached. Our systems were not breached. Well, semantics, because the user's data wasn't safe. And so much about data now is a privacy issue. And our constituents, whether they're clients or partners, whatever, trust us. And a lot of these relationships are based on trust. And so if you can't keep the data, there's a lack of trust inherent. And so Apple implemented something called two-factor authentication. You've probably seen it now, where you have to get text. And two-factor authentication is a very simple concept. It's something you know, which is a password, plus something you have, which on a phone, it'll text you. So that's something you have. And so they're raising that level of awareness, or security. But I say all that, and you look at some of these names elsewhere: Bank of America, JP Morgan, big, complicated firms. This stuff's hard stuff, but really the biggest risk is you. It's kind of the bad news. But the good news is there's some things we can do. So in case my words aren't compelling enough, I thought I'd throw some numbers to prove my point, because if you don't believe me, maybe you can believe these numbers. Really, the thing to think about here is we used to think in the cybersecurity world as a keep them out. The game was keep them out. Now the game's changed. It's detect and respond and remediate. And that's going to that last one. Quickly tell you the story of Target. The big retailer 18 months ago or so had that massive breach around their credit card data. You know who told them? And they had a dedicated security team of over 100 individuals. You know who told them that they were breached? A reporter, a cyber reporter that goes in and looks at the dark web, which is where cyber criminals operate, and he started correlating where all of these stolen credit cards were coming from. And he said, hey, Target, oh, by the way, we think all your data is out there. And there's one journalist that's very good, and he notifies about 40 to 60% of the attacks through looking at the stolen data. It's the equivalent of going to the pawn shop and finding out who got robbed. Right? That's the equivalent story. It's quite shocking. And so there's a lot of work being done around resolution. And here's some data. And if you don't believe me still, let's put some, let me just bounce one forward here. So there's a couple of quotes. We'll back up to those slides here. And Director Mueller had this great quote, and we've worked with the FBI extensively, that says there's two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that will be. Not only do I provide cyber services, I'm a CEO of a 140-person company. We have lots of vendors that we manage, and I'll ask a vendor, tell me the last time you were hacked, and they proudly say we've never been breached. And my response always is, you're either lying to me or you're incompetent, because everyone's been breached. It's just a matter of time. Certainly, unless they've been around 6 months or so. There's some other quotes to justify it. But these are not the war games types that you think about. Some of these are very, very small. This is all about monetizing the information. So let me just back up a little bit. So when we talk about the problem, a lot of this, what you see here on the right-hand side, is very technical, right? And these are APTs, a big buzzword: zero-day attack, data destruction. These are pure data destruction, what happened at Sony, ransomware. And I'll spend a second on this because this is really affecting individuals. It's called crypto locker, but the type, and there's one called Tesla locker right now. And it's this idea that they go onto your home computer, your work computer, they find unstructured data. That's a fancy word for saying your Word files, your Excel files, your PowerPoints, PDFs, pictures, music. It locks them up. You double click to open them up, and it says, pay us $350 in 24 hours or your data's gone forever. And a couple of things about it that are brilliant. This is kind of like one of those brilliant scientists. They know 350 is the magic number. They've been doing this millions of times. That's the sweet spot. They're almost like macroeconomics economists. They understand that that's the elasticity point that says, okay, if it was $1,000, you say, forget it. 350 is the sweet spot. But here's the thing. This is where good just data backup, good what we call IT hygiene happens here, IT practice, that can resolve that. Some of the other stuff requires bits. But as we go through on the left-hand side, there's a stat here that I really want you to read. 95% of all attacks on enterprise networks are the result of successful spearfishing. Enterprise networks. So spearfishing is the idea that I can go on, I'll pick on Catherine, I can go on her LinkedIn page, I can see she went to Tufts University, I can say, let's try to get into Catherine's network. The first thing I would do is I would create a fake Tufts alumni email with some attachments, and I would target her. And I would say, dear Catherine, here's a Tufts email, I'd spoof the email address. She clicked on it, I have a foothold, I'm into the network. That's spear phishing. A general phishing is, hey Catherine, I don't know if you're a member of Citibank or not, I'm gonna send you and 1 billion of my other friends a Citibank email. That's just phishing. So the spear phishing is very targeted. I'm going to take something, I'm going to scrape data, and there's a lot of information out there where bad guys go out and scrape data, go into things like LinkedIn, go into things like Facebook and say, let's look at all the people who are a member of New York Roadrunners Club. Grab their addresses and target them. And so this is where the threat is, and this is the story we really want to focus on today, is that social engineering and internal users and what you can do to protect yourself. So as I said, we work with the financial community, so this is a slide we use quite a bit, but it's applicable to all organizations. This is, why does this matter from a business standpoint? I'll focus your attention on the bottom two. Intellectual property risk, so whatever your data is, and then most importantly is reputational risk. Again, we have a trust relationships with our constituents, and when you lose their data or their data becomes public, that violates that trust relationship, and it ultimately harms your reputation. Please jump in and ask questions if anything jumps in. Again, it's close. Okay, so these are the top 4 of 2014, and for those that are really on top of their game, Target technically ended in the end of 2013, but it was reported in 2014. Big companies here, Sony, eBay, Target, Home Depot. This will be one of your only quizzes. What do they all have in common? Yep. What's the next line though? Second after their names. What do they all, how did they all get hacked? Phishing. All end users. They all got exposed to their end users. These all had these great firewalls, right? They all have they have awesome technology. They have antivirus. They have encryption, right? But why do I need all of that if you're just going to give me your username and password? Think about the path of least resistance. What's harder, cracking the code of a Cisco device, some firewall, or just asking you for your username and password? It's much, much easier. And the rest of this is, again, these are big problems. And this is why firms are investing a lot of time and money in doing exactly what we're doing today, is trying to educate and improve their user experience. So I have a funny story. I was giving a presentation on, we do mock phishing, we'll show you one in a second, where we will send out phishing to educate a group like this. So we'll send out a fake phishing email. And this board member was really, not to pick on board members, was very like, who cares? I gave you my LinkedIn password. Why do you care? And he was all bowed up and everything. I said, have you ever used your LinkedIn password, that username and password, on any other system? And he just slouched. Because how many of you use the same username and password, right? You do it all the time. And here's what we're showing. Here's what we're showing here. This is a LinkedIn login, right? There, I get your LinkedIn login. And there's systems and tools out there for the bad actors to take a known username and password and apply it to about 450 good sites that have rich monetizable data and see if they work instantly. How many of you would fail that miserably? Right? So when you think about signing up for your kid's PTA or their soccer league or whatever, and you use that same one that you use on a critical system, you better hope that security at that PTA or soccer club or whatever that is as good as you're trusting at Chase Bank. Because if that gets compromised, it's as good as your bank being compromised. Yeah.
Just made me think about in having multiple passwords, how sometimes I choose for certain logins just to log in without having to put in the password afterward. Just, I mean,
Sure.
if a lot of people do that, and if this is partially
Sure.
the cause of these types of issues.
Yeah, so what it's not. What we find is that, you know, we're going to talk about mitigating factors. So a lot of times people will ask these questions in isolation. Like, should I do this or not? And it's often says, well, it depends. On that scenario, I would say, how are you securing your local PC? Is there a login? Is it encrypted? If it's a laptop, if someone picks it up and can they just log right in, then bad practice. If you're fully encrypted and you have a strong password to log in, I'd say okay practice, right? I'm never going to tell you that's a slam dunk practice. But one of the challenges here is password management, right? I currently have about 400 websites that I have passwords to. How could I possibly have 400 different ones? I use a password manager. There's a tool called LastPass. LastPass is awesome. And it's free, or you pay, I'm going to say $20 a year. I can't remember the exact cost for some advanced features. Great advanced feature they had just recently. eBay got hacked. I got a notice. It said, you have an account at eBay. eBay got hacked. Change your eBay password. Awesome, right? Because they were like connecting the dots for me. We live in this space, so we knew it, but that was an awesome, kind of consumer feature. Yeah.
So this would pretty much go against the grain of the sort of new practice of using like Facebook to log into multiple things. It's like, would you?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily?
Not necessarily. So what's good there is you have one password, and make sure but make sure you own it well, and you have to then know that account. So in ways, we call that single sign-on. So you have one login, and then it gives you resources and rights to other systems. So I'm a big fan of those, because I'd rather trust Facebook with my username and password because of their security practices than I would my local PTA, right, in that scenario. You can see it. We had this is a real, I'll walk you through a real scenario. We had a high net worth individual that was an investor in a certain fund. He gave away his Gmail username and password. The bad actor laid low and just watched. He watched his communication. He picked up his kind of dialect, his style. He saw he was traveling to London. He jumped on it. So then all his network knew. He reached out to a bank and said, we need to wire some money. I'm in London. We're going to acquire this flat, blah, 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 blah. They knew he was in London. Nowhere in London, do this wire. Don't use that one. He's a high net worth guy, so he threw some attitude around, and they just took care of it and wired the money to the bad actor. He had millions of dollars. They only asked for 200,000, so it wasn't like this crazy outlandish request. Although I think $200,000 anyone would think is a big loss. These things happen, and they did it through getting a username and password of something other than their email, but they applied it all the way across. And this is where we're just trying to show here graphically the kind of challenges you face and some of the dangers by having the same password. The solution there is definitely using password managers. We'll talk about that. So I talked about the phishing campaigns, and we execute these. And what I've done here is just kind of want to show you what a phishing campaign looks like and give you some of the summary stats that we typically have. So we send a phishing email that alerts them to new personal browsing restrictions. So it's a little threatening. It's like, you've been viewing restricted websites. No, I haven't. Initially, right? Oh my God, what have I been doing, right? So it puts you on the defensive. No longer the phishing one saying, hey, you've won $5 million in the lottery you never heard of, in the country you've never been, blah, blah, right? They get that those aren't working too well, so now they accuse you of something. It takes you to a site like this, domain user password. Oh my God, I want to log in and see what I do. If you type that in, you just gave them your password. Then the users are redirected to the company's homepage, and they think, okay, I'm good. So we do this. We did 50 of these last year. The stats are stunning. The first two stats, 32% open the emails, 23 download the image, aren't that harmful. 16 click, 6% enter credentials on average. I just did one in Chicago and London, and the stats was 26%, 1 in 4. And the way we did it was a little spear phishing. We copied their website. It was all public. We copied the image, the graphics, and we made it almost like a company newsletter. And they got 1 in 4 passwords to this organization of 340 individuals. Shocking. And it's real. We're another organization right now. We're doing, they just gave us 13%. They have 1,000 employees globally, and 13%. Think about it, 130 employees gave us the keys to the front door, right? It's kind of shocking. Again, you still have parachutes on. Don't worry. I know you're following. You still have parachutes. We have it. We haven't. It's usually my favorite part of this because I get to say how well or poor you did. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we actually, it's funny enough though, we did this yesterday internally at my firm. So we do this quite frequently. I need to make sure the team's on top of it, and I'll get the results today on what happened. Let's see, last year we had 140 and we had one person. It was unfortunately the person. Unfortunately, it was my personal assistant. So she had access to a lot. So that was a quick conversation. So I'm aiming for 0 this time. Okay, so now this is the part where you haven't deployed the parachute, but we're starting to think about it. And these are the things that I want you to look for. And this is really teaching you. I was asked a question the other day by a media outlet, and they said, how many C-suite people do you think can identify phishing emails? And I said, how many have ever been trained? I mean, this is not something you just pick up and learn until you've gone through something like this. And so these are some of the characteristics. And so you're getting that training today. So these are some the indicators that we're seeing. Verify your account, right? So log on, verify your account. A sense of urgency. Yes, sir.
Seems to me is aimed at not just us, but all of our members. And like, so are we obligated to educate our members about avoiding this kind of stuff? I mean, well, that's great. But I'm just saying it's a whole nother set of activities, but okay.
So the second one is this idea of trying to convey a sense of urgency, right? And we see this a lot, and I'm going to show you some examples, but if you don't respond within 48 hours, your account's going to be closed, right? And that sometimes some of these might take common sense, but I will tell you, some of the best security people get tricked by this. How many emails do you guys get a day? You know, hundreds, right? And you see one real quick, you think, oh my God, what happened? What did I do? I'm seeing these things, and they're getting better and better. I had one from UPS targeting me two weeks ago. That was phenomenal. It was so well done, and I get packages all the time. So why would I think it wasn't that account? Really, really well done. What's that? So, and I'll show you the URL, and I'll show some of the tricks they're doing. But I'll show you what that looks like, because I actually clicked the link. Third, the dear value customer, the generic, and then click the link below. One of the things about certainly banks and other financial organizations, they rarely will put a link in their emails. They will tell you, go visit our website. And that's the tip you should almost always use. Don't follow those links. Click on the link. I'm sorry. Then just go directly to your browser and type in citibank.com, chase.com. Yes, sir.
These phishing efforts ever like use like unsubscribe links? Because like I'm always like afraid to click unsubscribe links.
Yeah, so typically what unsubscribe does is it rarely is the case of it will install malware, but what they will do is they will know that email address is now legit. Because if they send the email to 1 billion people, and so now that email address is on a legit email address, and your likelihood of being targeted with better phishing just went up, like we think about 4-fold. So it's a precursor.
So how can you get unsubscribe to things you're getting all the time?
So if you're getting them all the time and you think it's a legitimate organization, the unsubscribe is fine. If you see the safe unsubscribe, that's a common, that's a good one. That's a good one. Otherwise, this is where you want to look at your anti-spam service ahead of your email to help block that stuff out.
Yeah, right.
That's a different issue. We can talk about that. There's a couple of services that are very good. We can talk about that. So let's go through some of these examples and some of these. What, Tiffany? Sorry.
Yeah. What about those mass unsubscribe services like Unroll.me?
Yeah, those are all good. Okay. Certainly, I mean, if you go directly to those sites, there's 2 or 3, and that one's legitimate. Those are good. a couple things to look at here. So this is one, if you look at the to address, Ray Hill, and this is our director of security consulting, a 15-year Marine. He does cybersecurity for the Marines still, as well as working for Agio. He almost got fooled on this. This is a very good one. If you look at this, this was last fall. So a couple things to note. See where it says to protect your privacy, right, load the pictures? That's what we mean by loading the pictures. So by default, we recommend you don't have the pictures enabled. That's a setting you can enable in Outlook, whether in Mac or on Windows. But you'll see here, we've received your request. Nothing in here says his name to close your Gmail account. Deactivation will be effective within 72 hours. Sense of urgency. Click here to cancel the deletion process. Doesn't say go visit Gmail. It says click here. When you hover over it, just put your mouse over it. What you see here is what's showing up on the right. gmail.fluidbase.com. Does anyone think that's gmail.com? So here's the thing about domain names. It's the name directly in front of the .com or .gov or .edu. It's not anything else. Anything else is window dressing. So this is one of the key tactics you can use to protect yourself. Hover over and look what it is. All of the email clients will, when you hover over, will show you the actual address, not the text that's stepping in front of it. So we use a service from McAfee that's now owned by Intel Security. It's called Click Protect. So every email that comes into Agio actually gets converted. So that email address actually got converted. When he clicked on it, it actually got scanned by McAfee. This is how hard the environment is. McAfee, look what it said. Appears to be safe. Unverified, though uncategorized. So even some of those protections, and Gartner and everyone else says this is the best service on anti-spam and anti-malware. We can help you with that. It's like $2 a month per user. It's very cheap. We'll get it. It's very cheap. Here's some others, and let me show you. It might be hard to see, but look at the bottom. So look how good this email looks. Bank of America, good long. You know, this isn't the misspelling and terrible punctuation of spam 5 years ago. This is a legit, good-looking email. I love the Olympic logo on the right? Like it's pulled together. But let's hover over that link and see what happens. You see www.bankofamerica.com in there? That's a good one. But it's after the first .com. So you want to start far left. Far left, it goes http goodbox-pc.com. Anything after that, anyone can put. It's window dressing. So if you quickly look at it, though, and your eye goes to the middle and you see bankofamerica.com, you think, that's cool. That's good. It's not. You need to make sure and be diligent and look all the way left. Now, if you got this and you weren't sure, what would you do? What would you do? Good. Someone's listening. You get a star. Yes. You look at that. Right. You look at that site. You look at that sign and go, I'm not sure. Let me just go to the site. I bet you've all gotten an email like this today. That's not legitimate. Okay, so target. Legit or not legit? Why? So awesome, right? This is actually legit. They used a marketing service to do it. They used a marketing sort of trick question, right? God, I'm the worst. Trick question. That said, this was actually someone internally. Go to the website. Verify it. This is a scam that's happening because of their breach. They want to notify their customers and give them free service. So you know what the bad actors do? They get they say Anthem just got breached. They start sending emails to everyone saying their Anthem, we lost your data, log in. You have a question?
Major corporate services like Target or the other major corporations.
It's difficult, right?
Like small services so that you're not likely to say, oh, because I'm not a Target customer, so I got this. I'd be like, this is clearly junk.
Yeah, it's difficult. So here's one that's on Facebook, and this is where cybersecurity and privacy tend to be separate conversations. We think of those very separate. They're merging together very quickly. Most in the cybersecurity world, when we think about creating policy, we follow something from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's called the NIST framework. The NIST actually just published a privacy framework yesterday that we think is going to be pretty transformative around data privacy. And here's an example of kind of how that works. On the left, leaving today on a 2-week cruise to Jamaica.
Hate those people.
Right? I can right now go and buy a list on the dark web of people who are on vacation next week in Manhattan. Not that I would. It's for the light, isn't it? And here's one that is real. So a couple weeks ago, we created this after the terrible tragedy in Nepal. So a lot of people were prompted to donate to the Red Cross, and they did. So then what was happening was people were receiving these certificates that said, show your generosity, share this with your friends, and it said, you know, I donated to support the Nepal cause, and it was a PDF. Actually, it was malware. You double-clicked it, installed malware, popped up your awesome, legit-looking Red Cross certificate that you could then share with your friends. So they're capitalizing on the current activities going on. Okay, so how do you move forward? There's a lot of scary information here. Delete these suspicious emails. Again, reiterating some of the stuff. Visit the websites directly. If you're still not sure, contact them. Don't click on those links, and then we recommend taking off those remote images. What the remote images do, if they're automatically loaded, is they know, what they'll do is they'll put a remote image, and all that tells them is, to your question earlier, is they'll say that email is legit. So if I have emails on, they'll say bart@agio.com. We know that's a good email address. And so now my chances of getting phished have gone up. So if you see stuff, one of the best methods when you guys ask the question about when we do phishing internally, what always happens, and I love it, is not only do people delete the email, but they go out and they report to others in the firm, hey, we just got a phishing, we did American Express this time. There's a phishing attack going on Agio against from American Express.
That is not possible because at least 50% of my emails right now are spam junk.
So spam is a little different than, buy the Viagra spam stuff is a little different than if you think they're just phishing. So, hey, I just got an email that's trying to be Bank of America, right? So those, we want people to, even if you stand outside your office and shout down the hallway, right? And you can decide how you want to communicate with each other. What other systems you have? You shout a lot, good. But there's some communication around that.
Yeah, no, we have a...
Great.
So it won't come in again.
Good practice. Yeah.
I'm actually really concerned on the other side, which is that you've now shown me that Target and Bank of America and all of those places are subject to being spoofed.
Yeah.
We use a ton of graphics. We have 3,500 members that we send a newsletter out to. We send all of this information out to them. And how do we protect them against thinking that it's a legitimate philanthropy in New York?
One of the things that was wrapped up in my comment before about large corporations, they are going to be phishing based on, one of the questions about being a target is that they are going to use recognizable names, for a mass audience. So they're going after Bank of America customers or Target customers because how many of us have not been to a Target? You know what I mean? Like bought stuff at them. So, for us as a potentially vulnerable organization, one, we have to be, for them to want to get into our systems, we have to have something that they want to steal, right? Mm-hmm. So they have to actually know us and know that we have something worth stealing to come after. They have to know that we, have an audience, or that and the way in which we communicate, which requires some diligence and research on their part. And I guess my question is, to what degree, yes, we should be safe and like protect ourselves and stuff like that, but to what degree are we going to likely be a target as a
so
small
it's a great question. And we face this from, we work with some clients that are very high profile. They're in the paper every day. And then some guys are like, why do they want us? We're small potatoes. To your point, and you made a couple of statements as fact that I would disagree with. It says they need to know certain things. They need to know what you have. So we just attended a briefing by the FBI, and we categorize threats in kind of 3 areas. We're nation state threats. We have a client that handles about 25% of the transportation in the country. They get attacked by Iran and Syria every day. It's a nation state threat, right? So they're trying to disrupt the transportation industry in the United States. We have other clients that have geopolitical activity, right? And they're called the other side, the bad actors are called hacktivists, right? That are trying to, or cyber vandals, and they're trying to. That's the ones that deface the homepage of a certain website. From a threat standpoint, neither of those are your. They're not targeting you. Absolutely right. They don't care about you. Move on. Just like, they're focusing on 3-letter agencies and Fortune 50, right? The next area, and by far the largest, is we call it the opportunistic cyber criminal. They don't care who you are. They don't know who you are, but you are monetizable. There's data about you that's monetizable, whether you're at home, whether you're here, wherever you are. I can get your information and I can sell your personal information for $50. And you might not think that's a lot of money, but when you look at a scale with billions of people online, you don't need a lot of percentages to make that $50 start being something. Now, why are people buying it? That's a whole different conversation, what they can do with that data and where it's useful. And we don't see a difference for almost 90% of our clients on their threat and their vulnerabilities, depending on whether they're a hedge fund, a private equity firm. We also do work for 2 very large fast food chains. The difference on that is none.
We don't, I would say that we probably, if people are looking, if those entities are looking for valuable information that they could get from us, what do we have? We have email addresses, which to some degree are valuable. But we don't have some of the other any of the other things that I think most of these people. You
have personal identifier. It's called PII.
We have no social security numbers. We have no credit card numbers, etc. Sure.
Because I think we're going to come back to it. I don't agree with you. I think we have access to what would be really interesting information on the certified people. So I'm going to inject.
Sure.
A lot more presentation.
Yeah, 2 or 3 more slides. So here's some of the things that you can use and do. So this is the part where we're hopefully pulling that ripcord and starting to have some actionable things. And you guys can have this presentation and make these actionable steps for yourself. And there's 2 slides of kind of activities. These are a little bit more personal, and the next one's a little more business related. So use separate passwords. Seems obvious. Do not exchange home and office content. It gets very sloppy where people, so what we see a lot of times is you have, this is where one of the, I think it was probably, we ranked them number 3 last year of reasons why firms got infected was because a kid was playing a game on a work system. They installed some software, they clicked around, next thing you know, they installed malicious software that then infected the work. This is also happening where you send a list of employee information with birthdays and maybe social security numbers, what we call PII, personal identifying information, and you send it to your Gmail account, where your Gmail account's secured with the password, password1. It gets hacked. Now all of your company's data is now on Gmail. We call this surface area in the cybersecurity landscape. So surface area, 15 years ago, you used to think of it as a server at want to operate in the office is very small. Think about surface area now. We all have devices, we all have mobile, we all connect from home. The surface area, you have providers, you probably have a payroll provider that has your PII, you're responsible for it. You have all of these, your surface area is now enormous. What we're saying is don't send your data to personal systems, further expanding your surface area.
We've all done it.
Yeah, we don't even, so a lot of, we don't even allow Gmail from our work systems. We don't even allow people to go to Gmail, Yahoo, all of that. What is the next one? Oh, the pop-up messages, we've talked about that quite a bit. You brought up the unsubscribe, just understand the caution there, and then hover over the links, we've covered that. Yeah.
So I'm actually thinking about this from the opposite standpoint. We do a lot of communications out to our members that actually might look like malware.
Oh, interesting.
Now that I'm thinking about how we use, our unsubscribe links, our user identified emails that they get that are automated, kind of saying like, dear member or dear customer.
Sure.
What do you suggest for us not to get flagged by like the big banks?
Sure.
Because they might not be actually getting our emails all the time. We've had problems with them kind of catching our emails.
Yeah, I can certainly follow up offline, but there's some whitelist services that you can register with that go in and say we are a legit organization, and you have to check in quarterly, and they make sure you're not spamming people. So that's a good one to use because most big organizations subscribe to those whitelists. The other thing is make them personal. So don't put dear member if you can. If it's a mass link, put their names in them. That shows a next level of exactly. Bones it up. Exactly, well done. And what I like also is putting in, if you're going to ask them to click on a link, put the URL and don't mask it. So instead of saying click here, no, hyperlink it is okay, but when you hyperlink it, don't cover it with the text that says click here. A lot of times just put the full link. It says, visit our website, and then what we'll do is put in parentheses www.agio.com. And then when they click on it, it takes them to agio.com. A few, and sometimes they're messy, right? When you have a long link, and sometimes it's messy, and we don't. Yeah, and so they're, and in those cases, we don't do that either because, for marketing purposes or whatever, and the links get ugly. But all of those things you can do more of help. The other one is the reply to. A lot of times make it the same. So that's another scoring if the reply to is different than the from. So if the from says, now again, these are all mitigating control. So I'm not saying that one thing is a terrible thing, but it gets flagged. It can get flagged by anti-spam systems. It's just another scoring system. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Be wary of USB drives and other media. USB drives are the equivalent of like going into a first grader's classroom, right? It's just they're filled with germs. They're so susceptible. If you go to a conference and there's a bowl of USB drives, think about those as like a bowl of jelly beans. Don't do that. Someone asked me this morning if I was bringing a USB drive to the, and I wanted to say, you'll learn why in a little bit. Those are terribly infected. I'll tell you what we do for clients that are looking to improve their security and for, we call it USB baiting. So what I would do is walk around an office, we come in for a meeting, and I drop them on the floor. And they say, there's two types we use that have 100% success rate, and you'll love it. It's a little social engineering. One says personal photos, 100% of the time. And you know when they plug it in? They go home. But if you plug in one of those devices on your home machine, you're game over, I have you. The other one is comp. It'll say exact comp or just comp. Game over. We've tried some others, don't work so well. But USB drives are bad. devices. I'll tell you another bad first grade classroom in a second. Attachments. So that's where you really get into trouble. Everything else starts getting, they give you your email address. They might know that's legitimate, but when you open attachments and you download them, that's when you get really big in trouble. Yeah.
We send a lot of attachments. They're going from us, a known entity, to members who know us. Is there anything you add when it's, you're opening something from a known user? What else do you do to protect yourself?
Yeah, so this is where having good, what's called in-user protection, endpoint protection, antivirus, anti-spam, anti-malware on your machine. And that would protect you. So before it gets open, it's going to scan through that. I would tell you as a sender of that data, make sure I would run it through multiple systems to make sure what you're sending does not have malware. If you want to talk about getting flagged on systems, if you accidentally send something that's infected, I would run it. I would have a machine that's probably not even on the internet that has 3 or 4 versions of antivirus on it that you scan through. If you're sending it to thousands of users, it's not. I can tell you how easy that is. Can be.
Not to the entire membership, we're sending out attachments daily to groups of people.
So what I would say, make sure you have good endpoint protection on your machines. That's the number one piece of advice.
So, we've been thinking through doing our membership invoice renewals as an attachment, like a mass email. Is there any way, as I kind of think through the operational system of that I should be building out some malware protection?
So how will they? Well, so if you send it to them, how do they send it back?
Well, I mean, they'd still mail back the check.
So is there anything that they're filling out?
But I mean, the proxy was from LegalZoom, and then this would be through Salesforce and an add-on on Salesforce.
Perfect. So if they're logging that data in Salesforce, we're all Salesforce shop, very secure. That's great. What we find is when you send out documents, and you said invoice something, I can't remember, it made me think that they need to fill something out and then send it back to you.
Potentially.
And if they send it back through email, the analogy we give is email is like a postcard. When you send a postcard, everyone who touches that can read it. And email is wide open. So if they send something to you and it has personal identifying information or entity identifiable information, that's dangerous. Or credit card or anything, that's dangerous. Yeah. Right, so you wouldn't want that. That's where portals are much better because they can be secured and encrypted.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about the recent thing we did with the proxies and things like that. So we, this year for the first time, tried to use DocuSign to do proxies.
Yep.
But
DocuSign's great, and the reason why it's encrypted, we use it exclusively. It's the only thing we'll sign contracts with.
Rather than emailing multiple attachments, would you suggest just uploading it to the cloud and then they can download it? Is that a good solution or not?
That's fine, and that might give them more. So here's the risk there, right? If your website isn't secure and someone can get into it and they can encrypt that, so you have to think through that. So make sure your website's very secure. You want to secure that. What I'm thinking about is more how the data gets back. Yeah. So yeah, if they upload it to the cloud, much better, especially if you're encrypted.
So to that point, we have about 130 to 150 programs a year, and we let people bring USBs all the time to plug into our laptop computer to do exactly what you're doing here today.
Yep.
Should we be establishing a Dropbox or something like that?
Yep.
Okay.
That's exactly what you should do. Last couple things here. Do not allow, this is one of the companies we did it for, I need to change that, non-employees to use your laptops. This is, again, go into that point number 2. And when in doubt, call your help desk. Whoops. Okay, so a few other things, we'll leave that aside. So these are some other areas where we talked about password management. These are three that we feel good about: LastPass, KeePass, and Password Safe. On your mobile devices, I will touch on privacy for a second. So have you ever had that pop up where it says, Angry Birds would like to access your contacts? So here, how many of you are iPhone? All of you? Anyone Android? Android? So I'm not going to pick on you, but one of the challenges with Android right now is about 97% of all malware on mobile devices is actually on Android. And there's also a privacy issue. So the top 10 free flashlight apps on an Android, they're free, but they have access to everything on your device. So what they're doing is they're taking your and Google's trying to clean this up, but they're slow to the game, quite frankly. Yeah. It's one of them. Yeah. And also Apple has implemented granularity. So if you go into your settings, the little wheel, go into the privacy section, you can see at a granular level what apps have access to your location, have access to your contacts, your calendars, your photos, the mic, the camera, and you can say, why does Angry Birds need my contacts? I don't want that. But I'll tell you, like, if you say, why does Uber need access to my location services? Well, the app won't work unless you give it access to your location services. Or why does American Airlines need access to my, well, so that when you show up at the airport, it prompts you. And maybe so this is someone, Kat, you said it earlier when she talked about we decided not to upgrade or install these vulnerabilities at the cost of convenience or user functionality. Same thing happening here. You can keep your data very private. Don't ever get on the internet, right? Well, you want some of that functionality, so you have to make those trade-offs. The iPhone gives you the granular level to do that, where Android doesn't. It's all or nothing. You have a Windows phone, okay. So I'm not as up to speed on the Windows phones because they're about 1% of the market right now. But they do have granular. We don't actually know of any malware. There's security and obscurity, we call it. So you have it. There's always one. There's always one. No, it's fine. Exactly. Some of these are, download software only from trusted sources. This scenario, it's really a good, like the App Store on Apple is really good, and we're getting there with Google. Microsoft's coming out with a good App Store, which is really good, because one of the #1 ways people download malware is they think they're buying security software. Right? And so make sure you know from a brand name. And if you don't know, ask your vendors, or you guys can ask me. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so here's what I'll say on 9. This is for a New York crowd. It's like going to the bathroom at Grand Central. Only do it if you absolutely have to. Or Penn Station, there you go, even worse. Hotel business centers are it makes the first grade classroom seem sanitary. They are so free Wi-Fi, things that are like open. Make sure the stuff that you're communicating is encrypted. So that's the little lock, HTTPS.
So we provide Wi-Fi for people who come to programs here. It is locked.
I can see.
But you can.
Yeah. Trust me, that's my.
Okay, so what is our liability for having to ensure that network is safe, so that when people come here and get on that, can we be held responsible if that's a hot mess?
I'll leave the last bit to legal. So I hire lawyers too, so I don't pretend to be one. From a Wi-Fi, what most companies have is they have internal production where we don't put things like this up on the wall, which are secure. And then we have guest networks, which that is the guest. Okay, good job. Good job. It says secure. That's why I was really guessed it wasn't. Where we have guest networks and people can have access to that. I would change the password frequently. Your obligation there is, but if I was a user of that network, I would be make sure that I'm not sending super sensitive data in clear text, right? Because anytime you're doing that in clear text, meaning not encrypted, those are websites and apps that are not using encryption, your banks and all of that stuff. Traveling. So we really put this in there because a lot of our clients will travel to Asia, and I had a great conversation. I was sitting around a very culturally diverse crowd in London. I think we've represented 5 continents. There's probably 7 people there. And we were talking about issues in China and Hong Kong, and a British guy astutely said, mate, we're not worried about them, we're worried about you and the NSA, right? And I was like, wow, the whole globe is kind of worried about who's looking and what data other countries and other jurisdictions are gathering. We recommend Hong Kong. We've done tests where we've turned on a phone in 7 minutes, we've been infected. We recommend burner laptops, believe it or not, to a lot of phones. I know that sounds very Mission Impossible, but or Breaking Bad, where it's like you have a phone for a short period of time, and then it's done. We know of instances in Hong Kong where laptops have been copied in the hotel room when they left. Even we don't put them in safes. You don't take data over there that you really is sensitive information. Other jurisdictions aren't as bothersome right now. China, and if you're going to any of the countries on the not no-fly zone, but the terrorists in Syria, Iran, Cuba just got removed. I wasn't too worried about them, but any of those countries, I would certainly be North Korea. I would certainly be worrisome with your digital data. If you're going to more Western Europe, not a big concern. We have in the U.S., interestingly enough, our cellular networks are very secure. In some governments, they're not, even in Western Europe. It's very hard if you're transmitting data over AT&T. AT&T is a very closed network. It's very hard for someone to break into that. We've actually never had a known occurrence of that in Verizon or AT&T, where they're listening on that network on the data side of this. Yeah.
Okay, so I have in the past, when I've been traveling internationally, rented those like mobile Wi-Fi hotspots. Now I'm thinking that was maybe not a good idea.
Depends what countries.
Japan?
No, you're fine. There's no. Japan's very security conscious. We don't even consider them part of some of the China bloc of countries, right? China itself and some of their.
So this information changes all the time. We're getting this really wonderful presentation. I think we're all so grateful. It's incredibly interesting. How do we as an organization regularly stay up on the knowledge we need to know so that we are regularly upgrading and paying attention without spending a lot of money?
Yeah, there's some government agencies that you can subscribe to. They're like there's a Financial Services Information Sharing Initiative, and it's a big. The government in the last 6 years has been very responsive, or trying to be responsive, to share known information. So there's some good agencies that are providing some information. What I would tell you is it's points on the wall, though, and what I mean by that is they're not going to connect the dots for your organization, and so that's where you. It's a difficult question in the sense of it requires a little bit of expertise to connect the dots on this. And understand this is what we do as a business, and others do it as well, that we help organizations synthesize all of that and yield it to some kind of actionable, what we call actionable intelligence, where you need to actually change it. Because it is, I mean, the reason I came back to this slide, and I'll show you another one, is, in 18 months, what is this going to look like, right? And we actually just did a copy of this where it's all question marks, because it's changing. This is not, someone says, okay, if I do these 3 things, am I secure? And I say, well, maybe for today, but tomorrow it changes. And so when we think about methods, the most scary icon on here is the one that's not on here. It's the circle with the question mark. Because on the right-hand side, none of those existed 3 years ago. And so what's going to be the next method? What's the next ransomware? What's the next crypto locker? what's the next 0-day attack? And so I'm reiterating your challenge much more as I'm answering it. But we have this phrase, it's called DEPT, kind of stands for department, but around this you have to have diligence, expertise, process, and then technology. So many people just want to write a check and make this go away. And unfortunately, it's not. You can't. That's why, users are it. So staying aware of it, reading, staying in the press. I can point you to some publications that are good and some government agencies that are good as well. And that is it. So hold on, there's the big reveal. You have you have your parachute. You've landed. Unfortunately, it looks like the guy's about to go off the cliff, but you have lasted. Yeah.
The issue of thinking about protecting ourselves based on what it is malicious people would most want to get out of us. So is there some way of thinking about what is the most valuable information that we have and taking action specifically related to protecting that information?
This is where we start, because I often interface with other technologists, and they have their own opinions on what to do, and they say, tell me about this firewall or this antivirus or whatever, and I say, stop. What data are you worried about? That's the first thing we call them in this space, we call them the crown jewels. Of your organization, what are your crown jewels? And think about it from a risk perspective. If the data was available, if it made public, it's printed in the paper, what would be damaging reputationally, financially, any kind of damage, and then start there. And look at what that data is. I heard Salesforce, right? If that's the case, they have awesome two-factor authentication. No one at Agio can log in unless you log in with two-factor authentication. That takes the whole password thing largely out of it. And so that's the first thing you want to do, is you want to look at kind of that top down.
I want to go ahead and thank Bart. We can take questions offline now, but we're going to take the live stream off. And thank you very, very much. I know you are doing several of these today, so we also want to be very respectful of your